the record button and we'll get started here today. So recently I heard a podcast where Andy Stanley, who is a guru in the area of leadership, among other things, he has a leadership podcast, was sharing some 5 questions that really make for better decisions. He's written a new book called 5 Questions for Better Decisions and Fewer Regrets. Now, I think we're all down for that whole fewer regrets thing and better decisions. So I thought, I'm going to go ahead and share this because a lot of us are in a position to make a lot of decisions right now, and they feel really heavy, don't they? Whether it's your 2021 business plan or your kids' education, or for those of us with family in the area. I know, Winter, you aren't from here, but it can be, how are we going to handle the holidays, right? What kind of choices are we going to make about how we do this together? So I did just, I think this is my right screen. Can y'all see my screen now? Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, sorry, I have myself muted.
Okay, that's all right. I'm going to take this part and drag over here. Hold on. Okay. So I thought I'd share some of these questions with you so we can process together what questions or filters are we asking ourselves. You know, how many times after a bad decision have you heard someone say, I should have asked more questions? Right? All the time. Yes, yes. And we've heard it said that the quality of your response or your life is based on the quality of your questions. So I thought these were really important for just the time of life that we find ourselves in. The first one is what he calls the integrity question. And this has to do with asking yourself, why am I doing this? And then this last part's really important. Really. So it's important that we lead ourselves well. This is sort of a self-leadership question. We often don't tell ourselves the truth, do we? We kind of hedge things a little bit, which is what makes this the integrity question, to say, why am I doing this really? And then stop. Andy Stanley even says, it doesn't hurt to ask this question in front of the mirror, to go face to face with yourself and ask this question. He said, you know, sometimes he tells people, if you heard a salesperson saying out loud to you the words that you are saying to yourself about why you should do this, how ridiculous would that sound? And we often sell ourselves on something that isn't right for the time. So asking this first question, the integrity question, why am I doing this really? And then giving yourself time to think about it and really get to the root of it is important. The next question is what he calls the legacy question. And that says, what story do I want to tell? So we are all in the process of writing our story, right? One good decision or bad decision at a time, we are creating the story of our lives. And when we're in a season, it feels like that's huge, that is the time that that matters most, right? And the challenge of this is, you know, when you're in high school or college and every decision feels huge and everything matters so much and it feels like your whole life hangs in the balance. And now you look back and go, someone asked you about college, you can sum it up in maybe a sentence or two, right? It's just a story. It's a chapter in our life. But when you go back and retell this part of your life, what story do you want to tell? And I thought that was a really significant question, considering the time that we're in right now, right? In this COVID time, when you're got kids at home who are schooling and other things, I think this is a really important question. So I want to ask you guys, when you hear this question, what story do you want to tell? What comes to mind for you?
For me, it's what kind of mom I want to be, and what kind of role model I am for my boys. And when they look back on their childhood and growing up, did they see somebody who was there and present, but also strong and determined and taking care of other people? And what kind of legacy am I showing them?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because that goes to the core of who you are. What do you want to leave behind that really matters, right? So
Mhm.
that, I think that's what makes this question so effective as we're making decisions, right?
Mhm.
What story do I want to tell? Winter, anything come to mind for you when you hear that question?
I'm going to kind of second Maureen. Being a stay-at-home mom for the last 3 years, some days I'm like, I'm so over it. And then I'm just like, I am just had enough of these kids. But it really just attests to who I am and how much I love them and want them to know that mom was there and she was present. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. One of the examples of how this plays out in our decision-making process, Andy shared about someone that he was pursuing to hire for his organization. And that person was already employed at another company and said, they value loyalty so highly at this company. If they even get wind that I am entertaining a conversation with you, they will probably fire me on the spot because I will be viewed as disloyal. So he thought about that, and then he went back to him and said, when you go back and retell this part of your life, this story of this crux of this decision that came to you, do you want to tell this story by saying that you kind of hid out and kept it under cover and were maybe a little sneaky about it, or that you had the courage to be upfront and you operated with integrity? How do you want to tell this story later on? And he said, you're right. I don't want to be that guy that keeps it under wraps and then comes out and goes, surprise, I'm leaving. He didn't want to tell it that way. So he did go and have the conversation and was really transparent and courageous. And it went much better. He continued on at the company until he did make that decision and kept them posted throughout that process. And then he was really proud of how he'd conducted himself through that. So I just thought that was a really good illustration of how asking this question when you're in the process of making an important decision can affect the choices you make with that. So the next question he calls the conscience question. And I thought this was really fascinating. It would never have occurred to me. But the question is this: is there a tension that deserves my attention? Now, each of you are leaders, you're moms, and you are leading, first of all, in your homes, but secondly, in your businesses. Heather, in our organization here. And as a leader, you have that little nagging intuition, right? Something's off. You don't know what it is. Everything like logically lines up. Everybody else is on board with that decision, but there's something in you that just goes, And the hard part can be that you don't really have any data to support that something off, right? There's no concrete anything, but it's that little nagging doubt inside. And at this point, Andy says you need to let that get real big. Take time to stop and investigate it, and do not ignore it and rush right past that. All right? You need to stop and really think that through. And that's one of the hard parts, especially if you're having pressure from outside. If you've got some time constraints and you've got pressure to make a decision and do it now, and you've got that little nagging thing going on, it's tempting to just go, well, everybody else is on board. It all looks good. I'm sure it's just, my own insecurity or something. And you're going to have to take a minute, just take a beat there and identify, is it actually fear? Or is it something that's off that you really need to pay attention to? And if it's just fear, you can say, okay, I acknowledge you fear and we're going anyway. But if it's something else, then you need to stop and pay attention to that voice inside. Have you ever had that? Had that experience? Heather's a very intuitive person. And having worked with her for 6 years, I've seen her say something. And if we have the privilege, the opportunity to stop and wait some of these things out, then sometimes it'll come to light. Yes, this was the issue that was hiding under the surface, and we can tease it out a little bit. But I'd say trust your gut. Even when you don't have necessarily the data. Maureen, were you going to say something on that one?
I was going to say, my husband always teases me because a lot of times he thinks I'm overthinking things, or he'll think I'm overreacting when I say, I just have this gut feeling something is off. And I shouldn't say I'm usually, I'm always right when I have a gut feeling about something. And so I said to him, when are you going to start trusting my gut feeling? Because you always tease me about it, and then you always come back after and go, you know what, you knew something was off, and it was off, and sure enough. So it's, yeah, you should always pay attention to it.
Yeah. Don't rush past it. And this is going to become, as your business gets bigger and you've got more demands on you, it's going to be tempting to just rush by it and get to the next thing. Heather, were you going to say something there? Because you are one of the most intuitive people I know.
I was just going to say, it's so true. It is so true. I really do follow my gut a lot, but sometimes I'm seeing lately that sometimes a decision can take me too long to make. And sometimes that can hurt you too. So sometimes I have to I sometimes can't make that decision, so difficult and so out of hand. I've got to make it. So I am learning that too. I
right.
take a very long time and sometimes, yeah. So that gut is your gut. You know what I mean? You kind of have that, and you just know, and then you're knowing which way to go. But yeah. So
yeah. I think that's the part he refers to as the tension, right? Between something's off and I have to make a decision. And that creates a tension there that you need to pay attention to and maybe take a time out so you can specifically address it and not just keep pushing it aside, but take a time out and really address it. So the next one is what he calls the maturity question. Sorry guys. And this one should be, what's the wise thing to do? I'm going to go fix that slide. How about that? We're just going to go fix that slide. Sorry about that. So this one is, okay, here we'll go here. What is the wise thing to do? Part of what I thought was so valuable here was that he said, this isn't just what's the right thing to do or the moral thing to do. or the ethical thing to do, because a lot of times people will get as close to that, like the edge of that line as they can. Well, it's not exactly unethical. Doesn't make it wise, right? The other part of this is that it isn't like what is universally wise, as if there's a singular wise thing to do. There are three parts to this question that you need to use to tease out what is the right thing for you to do in a context, because we're making a decision in a specific context, okay? So one of those is, in light of my past experience, you know, if someone is making a decision about something and they know in their past experience, when they get into a situation like this, it causes them to slide back into some bad behaviors, or it can, you know, cause different issues. In light of your past experience, so this is in the context of who you are, or your organization is this the wise thing to do? In light of your current circumstances or state of mind. Now think how hugely significant that is right now. If you're making a decision about how you're going to celebrate the holiday season with your family, this question is especially important right now. What is the wise thing to do in light of our current circumstances in the middle of a pandemic? Or your frame of mind about that. Some people are extremely afraid right now. They are in a state of fear about and feeling vulnerable. If that's your frame of mind, what is the wise thing for you to do about your holiday plans, right? And the third question he uses to tease this out is, what is the wise thing to do in light of my future hopes and dreams? So is the decision I'm making now in alignment with those things, or is it neutral, or is it going to take me in a direction I don't want to go that's not in alignment with those? Is it wise in light of those three things? So what are your thoughts in this, when you hear this question in light of those three specific questions and components?
Okay, I guess I'll go. For me, it's funny I'm bringing up my husband again, but sometimes I will think that I need to get involved in things I don't need to get involved in terms of like fixing things or helping, you know, get in the middle of mediating arguments or things amongst neighbors or things like that. And my husband will always say, like, you know, don't get involved, stay out of it. He's always going for like the wise thing to do based on past experiences, where I will like think, well, the ethical thing to do is fix it, you know, and he's like, take a step back. And yeah, so that's what my take on that was.
Yeah. So I've decided that I just had let my eating habits and other things get out of control, and I needed to get back to getting healthy again. Just put up some curbs, get healthy. And, you know, if I think about the ethical thing to do or the right thing to do, those don't help me as much as if I think about what's the wise thing to do. If I'm thinking about the right thing to do, I'm going to think, okay, well, I can have a tablespoon of peanut butter here, but it's going to be a heaping tablespoon, right? I'm going to get as close to what I really want as I can there. But if I think about what's the wise thing to do, the wise thing to do is take care of myself. And in light of my circumstances, you know, being overweight right now really puts me at risk, at higher risk for COVID, right? So I need to be wise about, in light of my circumstances, in light of where I've been, in light of what my mindset is about things, I need to make different choices about you know, even just my health choices, what I'm putting into my body, how I'm spending my time, choices about when I'm going to get some sleep at night, right? Those are health choices. And those, when I put them in this context, have a really different answer than just the ethical or right thing to do, right? Sometimes the right thing to do is sort of an empirical standard, or the right thing to do according to the latest, you know, health guidelines or whatever else, but it doesn't necessarily make it wise for me. So this is sort of got that personal application piece to it. And the last one is the relational question. What does love require of me? This is not soft, mushy, gushy, touchy, feely love. No. This is a kind that requires self-sacrifice. But it is the right thing to do relationally for the person or the people around you. So recently, there's a woman I know who had an opportunity presented to her. And it would have been a big growth opportunity, big leadership opportunity. She had started down that path. And at some point, she put a hard stop on and said, you know what? My 10-year-old son is an only child. And with all the changes right now and him having to do distance learning, love requires that I say no to this opportunity in order to say yes to him. That's an example of the relational question. What does love require of me? And this is the kind that requires something, that we give something. The other 4 questions, we're going to get something back, right? We're going to get a little return on that investment. This is the one that's going to cost you a chunk of flesh. But it's really important when we're making decisions that we aren't going to regret later, whether it's professionally or with our kids, you know, all of us as moms. This, I think, is one of those questions that relates to fewer regrets, that part, as well as good decisions. Any questions or thoughts on this one? Anything come to mind? No? Okay. I also, the other thing that came to mind for me in this one was kind of how John Butler and our ownership has handled the COVID crisis and the staff. And even when it costs them something to say, you know, we're going to waive all the fees for all the agents, or we're going to let the staff work from home. This week, Lydia is working from home because she isn't comfortable being at the front desk with all those germs coming and going in front of her and would like to spend Christmas with her family, right? That the ownership says, yep, we're going to honor that. We want to make that possible. The relational question here for them is love requires that we make some hard choices and do make decisions on behalf of the people we care about and are part of our organization. So that was just an example that came to mind for me at an organizational level, if you want to picture that one. So the next one was some COVID questions that kind of came out of these, and these are sort of bonus content to the 5 questions that I've shared with you already. And these are ones that are specifically related to this circumstance that we find ourselves in right now, right? This is a really unique chapter in our lives and in this time. And the first one is, what do we want to leave behind? And what do we choose to leave behind? So there are parts of this that are really painful and ugly that we're going to say, yeah, I want to leave that behind. I don't want to think about that again. There are parts that we're going to carry forward, right? I think some of the things we should leave behind might be the judgmental pieces that really were not kind to each other. And we saw some of those play out in our relationships, even in the grocery store and line places, right? How ugly people could be to each other. That's a lesson, but we want to leave that behavior behind us. What do we want to carry on? We want to carry on the compassion that we might have picked up during this time. It might be some digital practices that we've picked up. We've learned how to do meetings online, right? You might have learned how to do webinars and other types of digital delivery of your services and other things that get you out in front of more people more effectively. I think you want to carry it forward. The other question you want to ask yourself is, how are we better for this? You know, whether it's in your family or in your business or in your organization, how are we better for what we've just been through, right? And then the last one is, how do we start over? So tomorrow can be our day one mindset. Think about it. The first day you started anything, you start with, blank slate. The whole world's in front of you, nothing but opportunity on that page, right? I think about football, love the Vikings football. And when they step out on the field, they have got visions of winning. They're all excited. Nothing's been played yet. Every opportunity is in front of them. It's so different if they're in the fourth quarter and there's 10 minutes left and they're down by 4 touchdowns, right? Your mindset's in a really different place then. But if you could step back on that field with that day one mindset, that minute one mindset, how different would that be? And as we get to start over every day, today's a fresh start and this is the world we live in. How are you going to do that? How can you approach this context and this day with a day one fresh start mindset? Any thoughts on these or any questions that you would add to these COVID questions that can help bring out maybe some things that are more meaningful or interesting to you? Nothing come to mind. I know nothing came to my mind. These came out of Andy Stanley's mind, and I am grateful they did. They're so good. They've been really good for me to be thinking about. So I'm just gonna wrap up with one last piece here. These are the closing thoughts, and that is, how do you do this really practically? Not every decision, like what to have for lunch, needs to go through these 5-question process, right? Not every decision is a major decision, but when you're facing them, how do you create the habits around these so that this becomes your habit of thinking things through? This becomes your habit of your decision-making process, so you can, with consistency, make better decisions and have fewer regrets. All right. So that's this last part I want to talk about, because this isn't our natural. I think the reason he had to write a book about this is because we don't think like this naturally, right? So step 1 would be create some thinking space. This is a discipline and a process, and you need to have a thinking space to ask these questions. One of my habits, it used to be a weekly habit, was that I would take Saturday mornings and I would journal, and I would just kind of dump out of my head onto my paper my whole week and how I felt about it and what was working and what didn't, and what I learned about myself, what I learned about other people, what I was hoping for the future. All those kind of things I dumped out on my paper and kind of tried to sort out a little bit. Well, I've made that kind of part of my daily morning routine now, and it's just an abbreviated version. But a space like that, if you create a habit of doing that daily, where you're gonna, that decision is on the horizon, and during that 15 minutes in the morning or whenever that is, you take time and you process through these questions. When you're making a big decision, remember at the beginning, we talked about how often we hear someone say, oh, I wish I'd thought that through. I wish I'd asked more questions. I wish I would have, right? One of the things Andy Stanley shared was that commonly when we see people, companies who've just made a horrible decision and really fallen, or you see a political or a church leader or something, right, that has a major moral downfall, they've just come unglued. It's usually that they were going too fast and they didn't stop and think about things. And what led to the crash was a series of bad decisions. Things that they said, I wish I could go back to that day and take back what I said, or where I went, or what I did, but they went too fast and they didn't make this a habit. So I would so encourage you to have a space. I think that helps, having a specific space you go to, having a specific tool that you use, whether that is, digital or paper or whatever it is, that helps you stop and really process. Ask that first question, why am I doing this really? And then start to work through some of those things. I think you'll find that really helpful. Andy said in his research that, finding a place where you can really recenter, having a specific space for that is significant. And then to time block it. You have a meeting with yourself. So for you, you guys are at-home moms with kids that are distance learning. You might have, Winter, did you say you have a 2-year-old?
Yes, I have a 2-year-old.
All right. Well, one thing about 2-year-olds, their sleep schedule isn't always what we wish it was, right?
Correct.
So, it might not be in your ability to get up before the 2-year-old and have this, timely thinking space or what have you. But you figuring out what that looks like in your life and then time blocking that and saying, nope, this is my thinking time. And it's an appointment on your calendar with yourself. Correct. So if someone else wants to do something, you say, no, I've already got an appointment in that space, but I could do it over here. And really do treat it like it's that serious.
Okay.
Because this is one of those things that if you race past it, we're moving into the area of worse decisions and more regrets. The opposite of what we're going for, right? So encouraging you to figure out what that looks like in your world, Winter, with a 2-year-old. Or Maureen, you've got those boys at home and they're doing distance learning and you're getting your real estate career off. That's going to look different for you too, isn't it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they're all at the different age. I mean, I've got my oldest is learning how to drive. So, that's, and then I've got 2 tweens that are not teenagers yet, but they're on that brink and they're not quite independent. And it's funny because you think, oh, they need less parenting than when they were. Nope, they need more parenting than when they were, there's
right.
It doesn't necessarily get easier when they get older. You want to be more present. So yeah.
Well,
and oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there's that sense of bigger kids, bigger problems.
Right.
And the time is shorter. Like you realize that 18 is coming up really fast and then they're going to go on and you don't want to miss any of that.
Right.
So there's a couple things going on there.
Right. So it's kind of like you want to create independence too, and you don't want to hold on too tight. You want to let go. So that's one of the reasons I chose, to do real estate at this time was because I wanted to be
Yeah.
present, but also showing them that I could do something for me
Mhm,
too.
mhm.
And then what that also made me think of is when you take a meeting with yourself, I think so many times, especially women do this, I think, we do what we think other people think we should be doing instead of listening to what we think we should be doing
Mhm,
and listening to our own true, authentic self,
mhm.
instead of the pressure of what everybody else thinks is right for us. And I think that's important too. You know, I had so many people try to talk me out of real estate. I cannot even tell you. My parents were like, "What are you thinking?" And now you know they'll act like they were the biggest supporters of it. Like I never said that. I always thought, what are you talking about? You know, so I'm glad, like, you know, when I look back, I'm glad I've trusted, you know, listening to your authentic self it's really important instead
It
of what
is.
other people think.
I
So,
was just thinking, what you just shared about outside people saying, here's how can you do this? And,
mhm,
if we're listening to those voices, you know, you can sit down and ask yourself, why am I doing this really?
really,
And if you have a good answer for that, it gives you a lot more backbone, doesn't it?
yeah,
And then if you're asking that question about what's a story I want to tell, you have real clarity about the story you want to tell your children or
mhm,
that you want to leave them, that gives you clarity about those decisions, those big life decisions as well, right?
mhm,
And the other one is what's the wise thing to do in the context of you?
mhm,
They don't get to decide that. There isn't like a singular wise thing to do. But in light of your hopes and dreams and your current situation, being able to decide what you want to do in that context, I think is really significant.
mhm.
And you're absolutely right. If you don't have the time to listen to that authentic voice, to identify those answers to those questions, it becomes really easy to get swayed by what either other people or circumstances are directing you to do.
Right. Well, and then that question, why am I doing this really? Um,
Mm-hmm.
if you're a people pleaser, I think oftentimes you say yes to things you don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find
Mm-hmm.
yourself doing something that you didn't really want to do in the first place, but you thought someone would get mad at you if you didn't do it. Instead
Yeah.
of, you know what, I do that a lot. And I'm learning as I get older to say no and to feel comfortable saying no.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really smart. Winter had the yes, I know what you're
Yeah.
talking about face.
Been there, done that. I had one last experience where I was people pleasing and it almost probably cost me my life. And I was like, never again. I'm very intuitive. And so if my gut tells me that something doesn't feel right or to not do it, I'm just not going to do it. I don't care
Mhm.
what you come up with to tell me. I'm just not doing it. So
Mhm. Mhm. Good for you. So are either of you, any of you facing a big decision? Maybe it's about, setting your goals for 2021. Or maybe it's around, like we've said, how are you going to make decisions about what you do in a pandemic this Christmas season, right? Um, any of you facing a big decision right now that you would like to start processing through? Let's see if we can apply these questions and see how do these fit into some of those.
So I would say the maturity portion of where we were. I was like, oh my God, I just dealt with this just like 2 days ago. I find myself just kind of sleeping through this pandemic. It's just becoming so much where I think depression was starting to set in. I'm like, I'm sleeping. And I'm like, I've been in this space before. If I continue to sleep, how is it going to get me to where I'm trying to go with real estate? And so today I called Trey and I was like, I know that I slept through that appointment the other day. I was like, but today I'm determined to get started and get moving in. So I just really had to do like an assessment. And I said, I'm going to have a cup of coffee. Like, what is it going to take to just keep me awake? So
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Yep. And it starts sometimes with one decision, doesn't it?
Yep.
That's awesome. Well, great. I can send you guys my little PowerPoint here with the questions on it. So you have those and can continue to process those or use them then in future decision making. And thank you for coming today to my little class. And I
Well,
hope it helps you.
Thank you. I'll tell you, I know I say this a lot, and I know that you probably hear this from other people, but what you write every single day, I am telling you, especially during this pandemic, when like it keeps me going every single day, every day. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That means the world to me to know that I'm helping encourage and bring hope to people who could get really weary right about now.
Yep. Yep. And I used to
That's
teach English, so you're an amazing writer. So I can really appreciate your writing too. So just
Thank you.
very good.
Thank
So-
you. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for being here today, ladies. Bless you. And I will send you this PowerPoint and we will talk to you soon. Have a
Okay,
blessed
and
day.
Winter, find me on
Bye.
Facebook. I'll see you guys.
I sure will. I sure will.
Okay, bye.
Awesome.